12 minutes after 6. Good evening. This is the UFM Business Hour. Kalibiso Kenan Black. In today's competitive business environment, investing in employee development is not just beneficial, it's quite essential as well. And in the country, companies with an annual payroll exceeding 500,000 rands are mandated to contribute 1% of their payroll to the skills development levy. And by diligently submitting a workplace skills plan and an annual training report to their respective sector education and training authority, these organizations can reclaim up to 20% of their SDLD contributions through mandatory grants. And beyond financial reimbursements, this process offers, avenues to apply for discretionary grants and enhance BBBEE, that's triple BEE compliance there, and address critical skills gaps within the workforce. And the significance of skills development, transcends individual company benefits. Globally, a skilled workforce is recognized as a catalyst for increased productivity, private sector growth, job creation, and inclusive economic advancement. And for South Africa, fostering such a workforce is pivotal in diversifying the economy and also just attracting both foreign and domestic investment and, sustainability as well, alleviating poverty there as well. And to dive deeper into the intricacies of, WSP as well as the ATR submissions there, and to understand the tangible benefits they offer to employers, we are joined by Strata-g Labor Solutions, Skills Development and Employment Equity Specialist, Mandilake Gilichana, a seasoned authority in employment strategies and skills development. Together, of course, we will explore how businesses can effectively navigate this process to not only reclaim financial contributions, but also to fortify their workforce, for future challenges there. Mandisa, good evening and welcome to the UFM Business Hour.
Good evening, Kenan, and thank you so much for having me, and good evening to your listeners as well.
Absolutely a pleasure to, engage you on this particular conversation. As we get into it, could you provide an overview of the skills development levy and, its intended purpose within the South African context?
I think actually in your intro, Kenan, you actually put it quite beautifully in terms of what it intends to do. So if you look at the legislation that were introduced post 1994 that were meant to assist the previously disadvantaged groups in terms of being able to participate in the economy, the Skill Development Act was then introduced. The idea behind it was to try and encourage employers to actually, train their workforce, to make sure that they are competent in their workforce, because once you have competent employees and organizations that are participating fully in the economy and are producing properly, then the economy benefits from that. But then the issue then was that, but wait, how are we then going to fund this? Because some employers did have, actually quite a number of employers had an interest in training their employees, but then the issue was then that how do we fund that? Then to supplement then that, the Skill Development Levies Act was then also introduced to say, for you then to be able to implement this training, you will then be contributing a portion of your annual payroll, which is 1% of that to SARS, and then a portion of those monies will be then sent to the relevant sector education and training authority, which is called the CETAs in short. Then you get to claim back a portion of those monies, in fact, in two thresholds. You get to claim what you mentioned earlier on, which is called the mandated grant, which is 20% of what the employer has been paying to SARS as a levy, and then 49.5%, which is the discretionary grant. In total, it's literally like 69.5% of what you can claim back to try and contribute towards ensuring that your employees are competent and, most importantly, they're productive so that you can meet your target as an employer.
Mandilake, beyond reclaiming the mandatory grant, how can companies just leverage discretionary grants to, further their training initiatives?
Right. So I think I've already, overemphasized the idea of, having them to claim them and to implement the training. What maybe is important that we need to do is to then zoom in on the type of training that we just need, they would have to then implement, particularly with the discretionary grant. So with that type of money that they get from the SETA for discretionary grant, we are actually now looking at what we refer to as accredited training, meaning that that is training that is aligned with SAQA or the NQF level that we have in our country, meaning that it has to be training that with a credible institution, either university or a TVET college, or even a private institution that is accredited with SAQA. Now, remember, the idea around those training interventions is that because the employees are assessed, they are then deemed to be competent. Remember, the problem that you would have with just general training employees is that you might not necessarily have a formal way of how do you then assess competency that eventually would then translate into a productivity. So once you then implement accredited training, doing either a qualification or implementing internships or learnerships, you then get to implement that for that benefit that it's accredited training, meaning that it's a reliable training. That is why most of the time employers who usually, use training that is international based, they have a challenge to some extent to then get the funds from the SETA. Apart from that as well, what employers then can do to try and also leverage that is that when they are then implementing learnerships, then they get to have what is they refer to as tax rebate that come with learnerships. So take, for instance, if a learner is a disabled learner, an employer can get a tax rebate up to 120,000, meaning that they may discounted an amount almost 120,000 when they have to pay their tax because they would have implemented a learnership, meaning then that once you then receive your funds from the SETA, you then implement a learnership in whatever qualification that is appropriate in your space as an employer, you will then get that tax rebate. In essence, if you're looking at the cost of the learnership, you would then kind of have paid for the learnership with that tax rebate that you will not be paying to SARS.
And in terms of triple BEE compliance there, how does, active participation in skills development impact a company scorecard?
Yeah. So when you look at the BEE compliance elements, there's about 5 of them, depending again on the industry that you're in. But then there's one that is very specific on skills development. So employers actually now encouraged to at least, contribute a maximum of 6% of their annual payroll towards BEE. So your training budget should at least be 6% of your annual payroll. Now, the advantage now is that employers who are also claiming monies from the SETAs, they can then add that to their budget that they would have to pay, because most of the time these monies are coming from the poverty employer. Imagine even employers 6% is R1 million, so it means that they have to spend R1 million on training. It's not always the case that they would have that money. But then if you then look at what maybe they would get from the SETA, if let's say they're getting 800,000 from the SETA as either mandatory and discretionary grant, then it means then that from their own pocket, then they might have to pay only 200,000 for that training that they need to implement in that specific year. So as you can see, then there is then an advantage from the BE's perspective, because for you to be able to get your BE points under skills development, there are certain specific programs that you need to implement, and amongst those are the accredited programs that you would get money from for the discretionary grant under the SETA.
Let's take a quick break. When we return, we touch base on some of the more common challenges that organizations face, especially when compiling and submitting their WSPs and their ATRs there, and how they can just overcome these obstacles as we continue with our conversation with Mandila. Okay, let's take a quick break.
It's a privilege to be in tune with you.